The lavender baby blanket slipped from my fingers when Rebecca's words hit me through the phone. He was born 3 days ago. Only special people came to meet him. Special people. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by 67 years of memories, feeling my knees weaken. The morning sun streaming through my lace curtains suddenly felt cold. David's wife, my daughter-in-law, had just told me I wasn't special enough to meet my first grandchild. 3 days? My voice came out steadier than I felt. But I called the hospital every morning. They said you hadn't. We switched hospitals last minute. Rebecca's tone was crisp, businesslike, like she was declining a dinner invitation instead of explaining why she'd hidden my grandson's birth from me. Victoria found us a better private suite at Riverside Medical. Victoria, Rebecca's mother. Of course. The woman who'd spent our entire first meeting examining my modest home with barely concealed disdain, asking pointed questions about my late husband's profession, my teacher's pension, whether I'd considered upgrading my neighborhood. The woman who'd suggested I might be overwhelmed by modern child-rearing methods. "Is David there?" I managed to ask. "He's busy with the baby. Oliver's been fussy." Oliver. They'd even chosen the name without me. We'd talked about names for months. David had promised to call me the moment they decided. Another promise broken, apparently. Could I at least see a photo? The words tasted like surrender in my mouth. "I'll send one later. I have to go." The line went dead. I sank into Robert's old chair, the one I'd kept despite its worn arms because it still smelled faintly of his cologne. 4 years since cancer took him, and now I was losing David too, pulled away by his wife's family money and their subtle dismissals of everything I represented. The photo arrived 2 hours later. My breath caught. Oliver was beautiful. Perfect tiny fingers, rosebud mouth, peaceful in sleep. But as I zoomed in, my nurse's training kicked in. The hospital bracelet on his impossibly small wrist was partially visible. My fingers trembled as I enhanced the image. The date was clear. October 3rd. Today was October 20th. That wasn't 3 days ago. That was over 2 weeks ago. I studied the photo more carefully. Something else nagged at me. Something beyond the lie about the timing. The lighting was soft, professional almost. Behind Oliver, I could make out the edge of what looked like an elegant nursery, not a hospital room. There were flowers, dozens of them, champagne glasses on a table. They'd had a party, a celebration. While I sat at home, knitting blankets for a grandson I thought was still in the womb, my phone rang. David. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded tired, distant. "Rebecca said you called." "David, sweetheart, why didn't you tell me Oliver was born?" It all happened so fast. The lie came too quickly, too rehearsed. Rebecca's mom had everything arranged, and I didn't want to stress you with the rush. 2 weeks isn't a rush, David. It's a decision. Silence stretched between us, filled with everything we weren't saying. "Can I meet him tomorrow?" I kept my voice gentle, even as my heart broke. "I could bring the blanket I made, the one with the little elephants you loved as a baby." "Rebecca thinks we should wait. Let Oliver settle into a routine first." "A routine!" I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "Of course. Mom, don't be like that." "Like what, David? Like a grandmother who wants to meet her grandchild?" "Victoria says..." He caught himself, but the damage was done. "What does Victoria say?" "Nothing. Look, I have to go. Oliver's crying." Another lie. I heard no crying in the background, only the muffled sound of voices and what might have been cocktail party music. Were they having another celebration? Another gathering of special people? "David, wait." I gripped the phone tighter. "The photo Rebecca sent. There's something..." But I stopped myself. The thing that had been nagging at me suddenly crystallized. Oliver's hair, visible in soft wisps against the white blanket, caught the light in a particular way. It was red, not auburn, not strawberry blonde, but distinctly, unmistakably red. David had his father's jet black hair, thick and straight. Rebecca's was the same. I'd once heard her mother brag about their family's pure Italian heritage, dark hair for generations. "Something what, Mom?" "Nothing," I said quietly. "Just, he's beautiful." "Yeah," David's voice softened slightly. "He is." After we hung up, I sat staring at the photo until my eyes burned. 2 weeks of lies. A grandson with impossible hair. A son who couldn't even look me in the eye through the phone. I pulled my old nursing textbooks from the shelf, the ones I'd kept through 35 years of retirement. Genetics, blood types, hereditary traits. Red hair is recessive. Both parents need to carry the gene. In my kitchen, surrounded by photos of David's black-haired childhood, I began to understand that the isolation from Oliver's birth might be the least of the secrets my son's wife was keeping. The lavender blanket lay forgotten on the floor, its carefully stitched elephants marching nowhere. 3 days after that phone call, I drove to David's house uninvited. The October rain pelted my windshield as I navigated through Brookline's tree-lined streets, each mansion more imposing than the last. They'd moved here last year, courtesy of Victoria's investment help, a detail that stung more now that I knew they'd been planning a family while accepting her money. I parked across from their colonial, watching the house for a moment. Rebecca's white Mercedes sat in the driveway next to David's BMW, Victoria's graduation gift to them both. The curtains were drawn tight despite the afternoon hour. My knock echoed too loudly on their mahogany door. David answered, and the shock on his face told me everything. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I brought supplies." I held up the bag of frozen casseroles I'd prepared, my excuse for showing up. I remember how hard those first weeks are. He blocked the doorway, not moving aside. My son, who used to run into my arms after school, who called me 3 times a week until he married Rebecca, stood there like a stranger, guarding a fortress. This isn't a good time. It's never a good time, apparently. I kept my voice light, but my eyes held his. 17 days, David. Your son has been alive for 17 days. Mom, please, who is it? Rebecca appeared behind him, Oliver in her arms. She was still in her silk pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, her usually perfect hair unwashed, but it was Oliver who drew my attention. That red hair was even more striking in person, catching the hallway light like spun copper. His face was pale, almost translucent, with features that seemed to belong to neither parent. When he opened his eyes briefly, they were a bright, clear blue. Not David's brown, not Rebecca's hazel. Martha. Rebecca's voice could have frosted windows. "We weren't expecting you." Grandmothers rarely need invitations. I stepped forward, and David had no choice but to let me in. "May I hold him?" Rebecca clutched Oliver tighter. "He's just eaten. I don't want him jostled." I raised David without jostling him to death. I set down my bags, extending my arms. "Please." The moment Oliver settled against my chest, I felt it, that instant, overwhelming love that defies logic. He was warm and perfect, making those little snuffling sounds newborns do. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength. But up close, the differences were even more pronounced. The shape of his nose, the set of his ears, even the way he moved. Nothing familiar, nothing of David, nothing of our family. "He's beautiful," I said, because he was, and because the truth of what I suspected was too terrible to voice. "Those red curls are surprising." Rebecca stiffened. David's great-uncle had red hair. "Uncle Tony?" I almost laughed. Tony was bald by 30, and he was adopted. Well, genetics are unpredictable. Victoria's voice came from the stairway. She descended like royalty, granting an audience, perfectly coiffed even at home. Rebecca's grandmother had auburn hair. "I thought you said your family was pure Italian, black hair for generations." The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went cold. "I think you should go," Victoria said, as if this were her house, which, considering who paid for it, maybe it was. "I just got here. I haven't seen my grandson." "Oliver needs his nap," Rebecca interrupted, taking him from my arms. "And we need to respect his schedule." "Of course." I stood slowly, my knees protesting. "When would be a better time? Tomorrow? This weekend?" "We'll call you," David said, not meeting my eyes. "You've been saying that for 17 days. Mom." His voice held a warning I'd never heard before. "Please." I looked at my son, really looked at him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His shirt was inside out. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt in a way that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. But there was something else, too. Fear? Confusion? "David, sweetheart, are you all right?" "He's fine," Rebecca answered for him. "We're all fine. We just need space to bond as a family. A family that apparently doesn't include me." "That's not," David started, but Victoria cut him off. "Martha, you raised your son. Now let Rebecca raise hers. Times have changed. Modern parenting doesn't need interference from grandmothers who actually raised children." I turned to face her fully. "As opposed to grandmothers who hired nannies?" Victoria's face flushed. "How dare you?" "How dare I what? Want to meet my grandchild? Notice that you've isolated my son from his family? Question why a baby supposedly born 3 days ago has a hospital bracelet dated over 2 weeks earlier? The silence was deafening. Rebecca held Oliver so tightly, he began to fuss. David's face had gone pale. You need to leave, Victoria said quietly, dangerously. Now. I picked up my purse, my hands surprisingly steady. At the door, I turned back to David. I love you, I said simply. I'm here when you need me, when you're ready to tell me what's really going on. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. For a moment, I saw my little boy in his eyes, scared and wanting his mother. Then Rebecca shifted Oliver in her arms, and the spell broke. Goodbye, Mom. The door closed with a finality that echoed in my bones. I sat in my car for a long moment, rain drumming on the roof, staring at the house that held my son and a grandchild who might not be my grandchild at all. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Patricia Hendricks, an old friend from my nursing days who now worked in private medical testing. Patty, it's Martha. I need a favor. A discreet one. 6 weeks passed in agonizing silence. 6 weeks of unanswered calls, ignored texts, and birthday cards for Oliver returned unopened. I'd started driving past their house at different times, just to catch a glimpse of them. Pathetic, maybe, but grief makes fools of us all. Then my phone rang at 3 a.m. on a December night. David's voice panicked and raw. Mom, I need you. We're at Mass General. Oliver, he's sick, really sick, and I don't know what to do. I was dressed and driving before he finished talking. The roads were icy, dangerous, but nothing could have kept me away. I found them in the pediatric emergency ward, David pacing, while Rebecca sat stone-faced, Oliver limp in her arms. What happened? He's been pale for days. David ran his hands through his hair, sleeping all the time. Tonight he wouldn't wake up for his feeding. His breathing was shallow and his voice cracked. I moved to Oliver immediately. My decades of nursing kicked in as I assessed him. Pale wasn't the word. He was nearly gray. His breathing was rapid, shallow. When I gently pulled down his eyelid, the inside was almost white. Has he been tested for anemia? They're running tests now, Rebecca said, not looking at me. Victoria's personal physician is on his way. Victoria's physician? I turned to David. Where's Dr. Morrison, your pediatrician? We switched, David mumbled. Victoria knew someone better. Before I could respond, a young resident appeared. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, we have the blood work results. We crowded into a small consultation room. The doctor's face was grave. Oliver has severe anemia. His hemoglobin is critically low. He needs a transfusion immediately. Then do it, Rebecca snapped. We'll need to test family members first for the best match. It's protocol, especially with infants. Parents first, then extended family if needed. They drew Rebecca's blood first, then David's. I offered mine as well. We waited in suffocating silence while they ran the compatibility tests. Victoria arrived with her physician, who immediately began questioning the hospital's procedures until I told him to sit down and let them work. The resident returned, looking puzzled. I need to discuss something with you privately, Mr. and Mrs. Collins. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of family, David said, exhaustion making him bold. The doctor hesitated. None of the family samples are compatible. It happens sometimes, but, well, it's unusual for neither parent to match. We'll need to search the blood bank. My nursing brain started calculating before my heart could interfere. Blood type incompatibility between both parents and child. Possible, but combined with the red hair, the unfamiliar feature, David seemed to be processing the same information. What do you mean, neither of us matches? How is that possible? Blood types can be complex, the doctor said carefully. Sometimes it's not complex, I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It's genetics. David, what's your blood type? O positive. Rebecca's A positive. They told us during the pregnancy. And Oliver's? The doctor glanced at his chart. B positive. The room went silent. Even Victoria stopped fussing. That's impossible, I said quietly. 2 O positive parents can't have a B positive child. An O and an A can't either. David turned to Rebecca slowly, mechanically. What does that mean? Rebecca's face had gone white. There must be a mistake. Run the test again. We ran it 3 times, the doctor said uncomfortably. I'll leave you to discuss this. We're starting the universal donor transfusion now. Oliver will be okay. After he left, the silence was deafening. David stared at Rebecca, who wouldn't meet his eyes. Victoria started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Rebecca," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "Oliver needs his father's medical history, his biological father. This isn't about judgment right now. It's about saving his life. I don't know what you're implying." "Stop." David's voice was hollow. "Just stop. The red hair. Mom kept trying to tell me about the red hair." Rebecca burst into tears. Not delicate tears, but ugly, gasping sobs. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was just once." "Who?" David's hands were shaking. "Who is he?" "Connor McBride," she whispered. "From my office. It was during that conference in September when you were traveling so much. I was lonely and—" "Lonely?" David's laugh was bitter. "We were trying for a baby for 3 years, and you were lonely. It just happened. And then when I found out I was pregnant, the timing, I thought it was yours. I wanted it to be yours." "But you knew," I said. "When he was born with red hair, you knew." She nodded miserably. "Connor has red hair, but he's married, has kids. When I told him I was pregnant, he transferred to the London office." Victoria finally found her voice. "Rebecca, darling, you don't have to." "She knew." David turned to his mother-in-law. "That's why the secret birth. That's why you kept my mother away. You both knew." Victoria lifted her chin. "I was protecting my daughter. From consequences?" I stood, my legs surprisingly steady. "From truth?" The door opened. A nurse peered in. "The transfusion is going well. He's already looking better. But the doctor wants to discuss his ongoing care. This type of anemia might be hereditary." Hereditary. From a father we didn't know, whose medical history was a blank slate. David walked to the window, staring out at the dark city. "I need Connor's medical information. Everything. Family history, genetic conditions, everything. David, please." Rebecca reached for him, but he stepped away. "Not for you. Not for me. For Oliver." He turned to me, and I saw my son again, hurt, broken, but still standing. "Mom, will you help me? I don't know how to do this." I crossed to him, pulled him into my arms like when he was small. "Always, sweetheart. Always." Behind us, Rebecca sobbed while Victoria made frantic phone calls, probably to lawyers. But in that moment, all that mattered was David's head on my shoulder and a baby down the hall who needed us to be stronger than our broken hearts. Oliver recovered slowly, but steadily. After 3 days in the hospital, they sent him home with iron supplements and weekly monitoring appointments. David moved into my guest room the same night, arriving with 2 suitcases and eyes that hadn't stopped being red since the revelation. "She keeps calling," he said, staring at his phone as it lit up with Rebecca's name again. "Crying, apologizing, as if sorry changes DNA." I made him tea, chamomile with honey, the same recipe I'd used when he was young and couldn't sleep. "You need to talk to her eventually. There are decisions to make." "I know." He set the phone aside. "Mom, I need to be sure, officially sure. Can we do a DNA test?" I'd already researched it. Patricia had recommended a discreet private lab, completely confidential. "I have a kit. We just need samples. Yours, Oliver's." "How do we get Oliver's without Rebecca knowing?" "You have visitation tomorrow, don't you?" He nodded. Victoria had arranged it all through lawyers, with frightening efficiency. Every other day, 4 hours, supervised by a nurse Rebecca hired. The woman who'd hidden my grandson from me now controlled when his father could see him. "A cheek swab takes seconds," I said. "During a diaper change, when you're alone with him." David's hands shook as he held the tea. "What if the test confirms it? What if he's really not mine? Then you decide what kind of man you want to be." The next day, we waited in my living room for David's visitation. He kept checking his watch, straightening his shirt, as nervous as a first date. When he left for Rebecca's, I gave him the DNA kit hidden in his diaper bag. He returned 4 hours later with the sample and a broken expression. "She had Connor's picture on her phone," he said. "She was showing the nurse, saying Oliver has his nose, his eyes. She's already rewriting history like I never existed." We sent the samples overnight. Patricia expedited them, results in 72 hours instead of the usual 2 weeks. Those 3 days stretched like pulled taffy. David barely ate, barely slept. I found him one night at 3 a.m. staring at Oliver's hospital photos. "I loved him the moment I saw him," he whispered. "Even with the red hair, even when something felt off, I loved him. How do I stop?" "Maybe you don't have to," I said carefully. How can I raise another man's child? Look at him every day and see Rebecca's betrayal? You wouldn't be looking at Rebecca's betrayal. You'd be looking at Oliver. The results came by email on a Friday morning. David's laptop sat between us on the kitchen table, the unopened message glowing on the screen. His finger hovered over the mouse. Whatever it says, I told him. We handle it together. He clicked. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The numbers blurred as David stared at them. 0. Not even a fractional chance. Not even a maybe. 0. He closed the laptop very quietly, walked to the bathroom, and I heard him being sick. When he came back, his face was gray but composed. I need to see the lawyer. Set terms. David. I can't, Mom. I can't pretend he's mine. I can't look at him and not see Connor McBride, whoever he is. I can't. His voice broke. But that afternoon, when his phone rang with the nurse saying Oliver had been readmitted with concerning symptoms, David was in the car before I could grab my coat. I thought you couldn't, I said, as we raced to the hospital. That's different. He's sick. We found chaos. Oliver's anemia had worsened suddenly. Rebecca was hysterical. Victoria was shouting at doctors. And in the middle of it all was this tiny baby, struggling to breathe. Where's Connor? David asked Rebecca coldly. Where's his father? London, she sobbed. His wife doesn't know. He can't. So Oliver has a father who won't come and David stopped himself. What does he need? Another transfusion, but we need medical history, the doctor explained. The anemia might be hereditary. Without the biological father's information, I'll find it, David said. Give me Connor's number. You can't, Rebecca gasped. His wife, his family. I don't give a damn about his family. I care about... David caught himself again, but we all heard what he almost said. Just give me the number. It took David 3 calls to reach Connor in London. I watched my son become someone I'd never seen. Cold, methodical, relentless. I don't care about your marriage, he told Connor on speaker. I don't care about your reputation. There's a baby here who needs your medical history, or he might die. Your son, McBride, your biological son. The silence on the other end stretched until Connor finally spoke, his Irish accent thick with emotion. My father had hereditary spherocytosis. It causes severe anemia in infants. I had it too, needed my spleen removed when I was 5. David relayed the information to the doctors, who immediately adjusted their treatment plan. Within hours, Oliver was stabilizing. The relief in the room was palpable, but David stood apart, watching Rebecca hold Oliver with an expression I couldn't read. Thank you, Rebecca whispered to him. I didn't do it for you. I know, but still, I'm filing for divorce Monday. My lawyer will contact yours about the settlement. What about Oliver? David looked at the baby for a long moment. He has a father. It's not me. But he stayed until Oliver was stable, stayed through the night, checking monitors, asking questions, making sure the treatment was working. And when Oliver opened his eyes and seemed to focus on David's face, my son's composure finally cracked. It's not fair, he whispered to me in the hallway. I was supposed to be his dad. The divorce papers were filed the following Monday. David's lawyer, Patricia's daughter actually, sharp as a blade and twice as cutting, made Rebecca's attorney look like a first-year law student. Within a week, we had a preliminary agreement that Victoria's money couldn't argue with. The house was purchased during marriage, the lawyer explained. Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state. Plus, we have evidence of infidelity. But David surprised everyone. I don't want the house. I don't want alimony. I just want this over. What he did want, inexplicably to everyone but me, was to ensure Oliver's medical care for 3 months. Just until he's stable, he said. Until the spherocytosis is managed. Rebecca cried when she heard. David, I don't deserve... You don't, he agreed. But Oliver didn't choose any of this. We worked out an arrangement. David and I would help with Oliver's care during his recovery. Doctor's appointments, treatments, the specialized formula he needed. 3 months. No more, no less. Enough time to ensure he was healthy. Not enough to form deeper bonds. At least, that was the plan. The first week, I watched David hold himself rigid during Oliver's appointments, speaking only to doctors. But when Oliver had a reaction to his medication and spent 6 hours screaming, it was David who walked him through my house at 2 a.m., humming the lullaby Robert used to sing. You're getting attached, I warned gently. I'm being decent. There's a difference. Rebecca started showing her true colors by week 2. She'd drop Oliver off for his appointments and disappear for hours. Just grabbing coffee, she'd say, returning with shopping bags from Newbury Street. Victoria was worse. She hired a night nurse so Rebecca could recover from the trauma. The trauma of her own lies, David said bitterly, checking Oliver's temperature for the 3rd time that day. Week 3 brought Connor back from London. Temporarily, secretly. Rebecca asked us to keep Oliver for an entire weekend while she sorted things. She didn't know I saw her meet him at the Marriott downtown. She also didn't know Patricia's daughter had a private investigator documenting everything. She's still seeing him, David said flatly when I told him, while his wife sits in London with their 3 kids. Does it matter now? No, but it confirms what kind of person I married. Oliver's health improved dramatically with proper treatment. By week 4, his color was normal, his energy returning. He'd started smiling, real smiles, not just gas, and despite David's best efforts, those smiles were often directed at him. "He knows your voice," I said one afternoon, watching Oliver turn toward David's laugh. "Babies respond to familiar sounds. It's not personal." But his hands were gentle as he adjusted Oliver's blanket, the one I'd knitted with the elephants. Somehow, it had become Oliver's favorite. Week 6 brought revelation. Rebecca called, hysterical again, but not about Oliver. Connor's wife found out. She's filing for divorce and naming me in the suit. Victoria's so angry. She says it'll ruin our reputation. She wants me to deny everything. "You have a baby with red hair in his DNA," David pointed out. "Bit late for denials. Victoria says we can claim it was artificial insemination, that you were infertile." The audacity rendered us both speechless. "She wants me to lie to protect you?" David finally managed. "After everything? Please, David, for Oliver's sake. He doesn't deserve to grow up with this scandal." "Oliver deserves a mother who takes responsibility for her choices." Rebecca hung up. An hour later, Victoria called, offering David $50,000 to support the artificial insemination story. "Goodbye, Victoria," was all he said. By week 8, the routine felt dangerously normal. David knew Oliver's feeding schedule, his favorite sleeping position, the exact temperature for his bath. I caught him buying diapers in bulk, then returning them the next day. 3 months, he kept saying. We agreed to 3 months. Week 10 brought Connor's wife to our door. Eileen McBride was everything Rebecca wasn't. Straightforward, honest, wounded, but dignified. She held a folder of documents. "I thought you should know the truth about my husband," she said. "This isn't his first affair. There was another child 2 years ago in California. He pays support but has never seen her." David absorbed this quietly. "Why are you telling me?" "Because Rebecca thinks she's special. She thinks he'll leave me for her. But Connor doesn't leave. He just moves on to the next woman stupid enough to believe him." After she left, David sat staring at Oliver sleeping in his bouncer. "He'll abandon him," he said quietly. "Connor will send money maybe, but he'll never be a father, just like he wasn't to the little girl in California. That's not your responsibility." "I know." But his hand reached out, smoothing Oliver's red hair. "I know." Week 11, Rebecca announced she was moving to New York for a fresh start. Victoria has a condo there. With Oliver? Of course with Oliver. David's face went carefully blank. "When?" "Next month, after our 3-month agreement ends." That night, I found David in Oliver's nursery, the one we'd sworn we wouldn't fully set up. He'd assembled the crib anyway, hung the mobile with elephants that matched the blanket. "I can't be his father," he said without turning, "but I can't let him grow up thinking no one fought for him either." "So what do you do?" "I don't know, Mom. I just don't know." Week 12 arrived like a countdown nobody wanted. Oliver was thriving, healthy, alert, beginning to babble. His final medical appointment confirmed what we knew. He was out of danger. "So we're done," David said to Rebecca as she collected Oliver's things. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I know you didn't have to. I did it for him. I know. That makes it even more." She stopped. "Connor's not coming back. His wife won, I guess." "His wife didn't win. Nobody wins here." Rebecca lifted Oliver, and he immediately started crying, reaching back toward David. We all froze. "He doesn't know me anymore," Rebecca whispered. "My own son doesn't know me." David turned away, but not before I saw his face crumble. 3 months of trying not to love a child who wasn't his. 3 months of failing. Rebecca lasted exactly 1 week in New York before the calls started. "Oliver won't stop crying," she said, her voice ragged with exhaustion. "He won't take his bottle Won't sleep. The doctors say he's healthy, but he's adjusting, David said coldly. Give it time. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand gripped the phone. That night, he didn't sleep. I found him at 3 a.m., reading medical journals about infant attachment disorders. She doesn't even know his schedule, he muttered. Doesn't know he needs his elephant blanket to sleep, that he likes his formula slightly warmer than recommended, that he calms down when you rub circles on his back. David, I know, Mom. He's not mine. I know. Day 3 brought a FaceTime call. Rebecca looked haggard, her usually perfect hair in a messy bun, Oliver screaming in the background. Please, she begged, just tell me what to do. David took the phone reluctantly. Show me how you're holding him. For 20 minutes, he coached her through Oliver's bedtime routine. When the baby finally settled, Rebecca burst into tears. I'm his mother. Why don't I know my own son? Because you were shopping on Newberry Street while we managed his recovery, David said, not unkindly but honestly. Because Victoria's night nurse did the hard parts. I was overwhelmed. You were absent, but he didn't hang up. When Oliver started fussing again an hour later, David talked her through it. This became their pattern. Daily crisis calls that David swore he'd stop answering, but never did. Victoria, meanwhile, was making things worse. She'd hired a baby nurse in New York who insisted on sleep training a 4-month-old. Let him cry it out, she advised, while Oliver screamed for hours. That's barbaric, I told David after Rebecca's latest panic call. He's too young for that method. Not my problem, David said. But he was already texting Rebecca detailed instructions about gradual sleep training alternatives. 2 weeks into their New York experiment, Connor resurfaced, not in person, he was too cowardly for that, but through his lawyer. He wanted to establish paternity officially and set up minimal child support. The catch? He wanted no visitation, no contact, no acknowledgement of Oliver's existence. He wants to pay me off, Rebecca told us, sobbing over FaceTime. Like Oliver's some mistake he can file away. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. She'd hidden Oliver from us, and now his biological father was hiding from him. Sign the papers, David advised. At least Oliver will have financial support. Is that all he deserves? Money? David's jaw tightened. Ask yourself that question, Rebecca. You had all the answers 3 months ago. But that night, he called his lawyer. Hypothetically, he said, what would it take for a non-biological parent to maintain some form of contact rights? I watched my son torture himself, caught between the child he'd grown to love and the betrayal that created him. Meanwhile, Rebecca was falling apart in spectacular fashion. Victoria called me directly. A first. She can't do this, she admitted, her usual superiority replaced with something like panic. Rebecca's always needed support, structure. I thought the nurse would be enough, but Oliver wants... She stopped. Oliver wants David, I finished. It's absurd. The child barely knows him. 3 months of daily care isn't barely knowing, Victoria. Well, what do you suggest? David made it clear, 3 months only. That night, I found David looking at apartments online. The house sale goes through next week, he explained. I need my own place. You could stay here longer. No, Mom, I need to move forward. Oliver's in New York. Rebecca's dealing with Connor's abandonment, and I need to stop... He paused. I need to stop waiting for calls about a baby who isn't mine. But the calls kept coming. Rebecca, overwhelmed. Victoria, demanding. Even the pediatrician in New York, concerned about Oliver's failure to thrive. He's losing weight, the doctor told David directly after Rebecca gave permission. Not dangerously, but concerning. He's also showing signs of depression. Babies can't get depressed, David argued. They can experience attachment disruption. He's grieving. David hung up and punched the wall, leaving a hole I'd have to patch later. This is insane. He's grieving? He's 4 months old. He's grieving you, I said gently. He can't be. I'm nobody to him. Just some guy who helped for 3 months. You were the one who walked him through his pain, fed him at 3 a.m., sang him to sleep. That's not nobody, David. But I'm not his father. Biology doesn't determine love, sweetheart. You of all people should know that. He looked at me sharply. What do you mean? I pulled out an old photo album, opened to a page he'd probably forgotten. David at 2, in the arms of my brother Tommy, who'd lived with us for a year during David's early childhood. You called him Dada for 6 months, I said quietly. Drove your father crazy. But Tommy was the one home during the day while Dad worked, and I did night shifts. Biology didn't matter to you then. What happened to Uncle Tommy? He got married, moved to California. You cried for weeks. I touched the photo gently. But you survived. You adjusted. You forgot. Oliver won't forget. Oliver's young enough that he might. The question is, can you? Before he could answer, his phone rang. Rebecca again, but this time different. Calm. Resolved. I'm coming back to Boston, she said. This isn't working. Victoria's furious, but Oliver needs... She paused. He needs to be where he was thriving. With you? David asked carefully. With us, Rebecca corrected. I know you said 3 months. I know I have no right to ask. But David, he's dying inside, and so am I. I can't do this alone. You have Victoria. You have money. You have nurses. I don't have you. The admission hung between them, raw and complicated. I'm not taking you back, Rebecca. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to consider what's best for Oliver. After she hung up, David sat in silence for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke. How do I keep loving a child that represents the worst betrayal of my life? You don't, I said. You love him for who he is, not what he represents. Is that possible? You've been doing it for 3 months already. David laughed bitterly. And look where it's gotten me. Yes, I agreed. Look where it's gotten you. You saved his life, stabilized his health, and became the father he needed when his biological one ran away. That's not nowhere, David. That's everything. Rebecca moved back to Boston on a gray February morning, not to the grand Brookline house that had been sold, but to a modest apartment in Cambridge. Victoria was so appalled she refused to help with the move, which is how I found myself carrying boxes while Rebecca struggled with Oliver's car seat. I can do this myself, she insisted, fumbling with the straps. Clearly, I said dryly, fixing the installation she'd botched 3 times. David had agreed to one meeting, just one, to discuss arrangements for Oliver's continued care. He'd been clear. He wasn't co-parenting, wasn't playing father, wasn't pretending the last 4 months hadn't happened, just ensuring Oliver's well-being. We met at a neutral location, my kitchen. Rebecca looked exhausted, her designer clothes replaced with practical jeans and a milk-stained sweater. Oliver, now 5 months old, was alert in her arms, but turned immediately toward David's voice when he entered. Don't, David said quietly when Oliver reached for him. Please don't. But Oliver's face crumpled, and the wail that followed was heartbreaking. Without thinking, David took him, and the crying stopped instantly. Oliver pressed his small face against David's chest and sighed, a sound of pure contentment that made Rebecca's eyes fill with tears. This is what I mean, she whispered. He knows you. We need boundaries, David said, though his hand was gentle on Oliver's back. Clear ones, I agree. I'll help with medical appointments, nothing more. Okay. I'm not babysitting while you date Connor or whoever else. Rebecca flinched. Connor's gone. His divorce was finalized last week. He moved to Singapore with some woman from his office. Already? Apparently she's pregnant too. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Eileen was right. He doesn't change. David's arms tightened around Oliver protectively. Then he caught himself and handed him back. Oliver immediately started crying again. This is cruel, Rebecca said. To all of us. You should have thought of that before. I know what I did. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. I know I destroyed everything. I know Oliver isn't yours. But David, he loves you. And you love him, don't you? The silence stretched until I couldn't bear it. I'll take Oliver to the living room, I said, lifting him from Rebecca's arms. He fussed, but settled when I gave him his elephant blanket. From the living room, I could hear them. Really hear them. For the first time since everything fell apart. I loved the idea of him, David said. My son, our family. But that was a lie. Your love for him wasn't a lie. How can you separate the two? I don't know. But when you held him just now, when he stopped crying, that wasn't about me or Connor or lies. That was about you and Oliver. He'll forget me. He's young enough. What if I don't want him to? Rebecca, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm asking you to consider being in Oliver's life, some way. Anyway. As what? Uncle David? Mom's friend? The guy who got played for a fool? As the only father who's ever cared about him. I heard a chair scrape, footsteps pacing. David's voice came out strangled. I can't be his father. I'm not his father. Biology doesn't make a father. Connor's his biological father, and he's in Singapore making another baby he'll abandon. You stayed. Even when you knew the truth, you stayed. For 3 months, we agreed. The 3 months are over. What do you want now? I want to not hurt anymore. The words exploded out of him. I want to look at him and not see your betrayal. I want to love him without feeling like an idiot. I want... His voice broke. I want him to be mine. He can be. How? How can he be mine when every cell in his body belongs to another man? The same way you became mine, Rebecca said quietly. Choice. I chose you, David. I chose wrong. I chose selfishly. But I chose you to be Oliver's father. And for 3 months, you chose him back. The question is, do you still? I peeked around the corner. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, the weight of broken trust between them. But their eyes were on the same thing. The photo I'd stuck to my refrigerator of David giving Oliver his first bottle in the hospital. I need time, David finally said, to figure out what I can live with. That's fair. And conditions. Lots of them. Whatever you need. And Rebecca? David's voice was steel. If you ever lie to me again, about anything, even something small, I'm gone. Oliver won't even remember my name. I understand. David left without saying goodbye to Oliver, who cried for an hour after. Rebecca walked him around my living room, looking lost. I don't know his favorite lullaby, she admitted. David always did bedtime during those 3 months. I taught her the one Robert used to sing, the one David hummed unconsciously. It's about a little boat, I explained, sailing home through storms. Did David's father sing it to him? Every night until he was 12 and decided he was too old. I watched Oliver's eyes flutter closed. David sang it to Oliver during his treatments, changed the words a bit, made it about a brave little elephant instead of a boat. Rebecca's face crumpled. I took everything from him. No, I said firmly. You broke his trust, shattered his dreams of biological fatherhood. But you didn't take everything. The love is still there. It just needs new terms. What if he decides he can't? Then you raise Oliver alone, with whatever help I can give. You'd still help? After what I did to your son? I looked at Oliver, peaceful now, red hair catching the lamplight. That baby didn't betray anyone. And David would never forgive me if I abandoned a child in need, even one that isn't his. But you hate me. I hate what you did. I'm furious about the lies, the manipulation, keeping me from Oliver's birth. I met her eyes, but hate is exhausting, and Oliver needs better than exhausted caregivers. That night, David called. I drove by their apartment just to check. The lights were on. And she was walking him around trying to get him to sleep. She looked, he paused. She looked like she was trying. She is. It doesn't fix anything. No, but it's a start. Mom, what if I let him back in my life and something happens? What if Rebecca meets someone new? What if Connor comes back? What if you miss his first word? I interrupted. His first steps? What if Oliver grows up knowing his biological father abandoned him and the man who loved him walked away? David was quiet for so long, I thought he'd hung up. The lullaby about the boat, he finally said. Did you teach it to her? I did. I changed the words, made it about an elephant. I know. That's his version now. The elephant one. She should know that. You could tell her yourself. Maybe, he said. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into 3 days before David finally called Rebecca. I wasn't privy to the conversation, but the results were clear. A meeting with a family therapist who specialized in complex custody arrangements. We're not doing custody, David told me beforehand. I just need structure, clear rules. The therapist, Dr. Melanie Winters, was a small woman with kind eyes who didn't flinch when David explained the situation. Rebecca sat across from him, Oliver in a carrier at her feet, sleeping peacefully. So you want to be involved but not legally? Dr. Winters asked. David struggled. I want to be whatever Oliver needs, but I need protection. From more lies, from sudden changes, from getting hurt again, Dr. Winters finished gently. Yes, they worked out an agreement. Not legal, David refused that, but written, witnessed, clear. David would be Uncle David for now. Regular visits, involvement in major decisions, emergency contact. But Rebecca had to agree to complete transparency. Any dating, any contact with Connor, any major changes, David knew first. And therapy, David added. Rebecca needs therapy, individual, to understand why he stopped, why this happened. Rebecca agreed to everything. She'd started therapy already, actually. surprising us all. I need to understand too, she said quietly, why I destroyed the best thing in my life. The first visit under the new arrangement was awkward. David arrived at Rebecca's apartment with a gift, a stuffed elephant to match the blanket. You remembered, Rebecca said. I never forgot. Oliver, now 6 months old, practically launched himself at David, babbling excitedly. David's resolve to stay distant lasted about 30 seconds before he was on the floor, playing peekaboo, making Oliver shriek with laughter. He's trying to crawl, Rebecca said. The pediatrician says he's ahead of schedule. Show me. They spent an hour encouraging Oliver's attempts, David strategically placing toys just out of reach while Rebecca cheered him on. For a moment, it looked like what it could have been, a family. Then David's phone buzzed, a text from his dating app. He'd started trying to move on, going on occasional dates that never went anywhere. You're dating? Rebecca's voice was carefully neutral. I'm trying to. Anyone special? Not yet. The moment shattered. David left soon after, but not before teaching Rebecca the correct words to the elephant lullaby. Weeks passed. The visits became routine. Tuesdays and Saturdays, sometimes Thursdays, if Oliver was fussy and Rebecca was desperate. David kept boundaries, but they were softer than he'd intended. He brought groceries when he noticed Rebecca's fridge was empty, fixed her leaky faucet, installed baby gates when Oliver started crawling in earnest. You don't have to do this, Rebecca said one evening as David assembled a new high chair. Oliver needs to eat safely. That's not what I mean. David's hands stilled on the screwdriver. I know what you mean. Do you hate me? Sometimes, but not always. No, not always. Victoria reappeared in March, having finally swallowed her pride enough to visit her daughter's common apartment. She arrived while David was there, her face a mask of displeasure. I see you're still involved, she said to David. I see you're still judgmental, he replied evenly. After everything Rebecca's been through, everything she's been through? David stood, and I was proud of the steel in his spine. Your daughter had an affair, lied about her child's paternity, committed fraud, and destroyed my life. What exactly has she been through that she didn't cause? Victoria's face went red. How dare... He's right, Mother. Rebecca's voice was quiet but firm. I did all of that, and David still shows up for Oliver, so maybe you should be thanking him instead of judging him. Victoria left in a huff, but not before making a comment about Connor. At least having good breeding. Good breeding? David laughed bitterly after she'd gone. He abandoned his son. She's trying to rewrite history, Rebecca said. Make it seem like I was the victim. Weren't you? In her version? No, I was the villain. I'm trying to own that. That night, Oliver said his first word. Not Mama or Dada, but Davi. Clear as day, reaching for David with chubby arms. Rebecca's face went through a journey of emotions. Joy, pain, resignation. He's been trying all week. I kept hoping for Mama, but I'm sorry, David said, though he was smiling. Oliver now in his arms, babbling, Davy, 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 like a song. Don't be. You're his person. You've always been his person. Rebecca, I'm seeing someone, she said suddenly. David went very still. Oh? My therapist. Not romantically, she added quickly at his expression. I mean, I'm seeing progress, understanding things, like how I used Connor to sabotage us because I didn't think I deserved you. Don't. I'm not trying to. I just need you to know I'm working on it, on being better, for Oliver. Good, and for myself. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth. Oliver was crawling everywhere, pulling himself up on furniture, babbling constantly. David baby-proofed Rebecca's entire apartment, then mine, then his new place, just in case. In case of what? I asked. In case she needs a break. In case Oliver needs space. In case... He shrugged. Just in case. The date came before any of us realized it. Oliver's first birthday. Rebecca planned a small party, just family. Victoria declined to attend, still nursing her wounded pride. But Patricia came, and David's lawyer daughter, and surprisingly, Eileen McBride. I wanted to meet him, Connor's ex-wife said, looking at Oliver with sad eyes, to see what my husband threw away. Why torture yourself? Rebecca asked. It's not torture. It's closure. Connor has 2 biological children he'll never know. But Oliver... She watched David helping Oliver stand, the baby's face bright with joy. Oliver has a real father. That's what matters. David heard her. I saw it in the way his shoulders straightened, the way he held Oliver a little closer. The party was simple, but perfect. Oliver destroyed his first cake with enthusiasm, getting more on his face than in his mouth. David and Rebecca worked together to clean him up, a practice dance of parenthood they'd developed without realizing it. "Thank you," Rebecca said, as David gave Oliver his birthday present, a wooden toy elephant on wheels. "For the gift? For this year? For staying when you had every reason to leave. I didn't stay for you. I know. That's why it matters." That night, after everyone had gone home, David helped put Oliver to bed. I watched from the doorway as he and Rebecca stood over the crib, watching Oliver sleep with his new elephant. "He's perfect," David said softly. "He is. I still don't know how to do this, how to be in his life but not be his father," Rebecca finished. "But you are, David, in every way that matters, except the one that counts. Biology doesn't count. Love counts. Showing up counts. Staying counts." David was quiet for so long, I thought the conversation was over. Then, "My lawyer says I could adopt him, if Connor terminates rights, if you agreed." Rebecca's sharp intake of breath was audible even from the doorway. "Would you want that?" "I don't know. Maybe. Someday." It wasn't a yes, but for the first time in a year, it wasn't a no either. Summer brought Connor back to Boston for one day. He needed to sign papers terminating his parental rights. Rebecca had finally convinced him it was best for everyone. David drove her to the lawyer's office, waiting in the car with Oliver while she went inside. "Your first time being legally fatherless," David told Oliver, who was babbling happily in his car seat. "Though nothing's really changing, is it?" "He was never here," Oliver responded with, Davy, and a drooly smile. When Rebecca came out, she was crying, but seemed lighter somehow. "It's done. Connor's officially nothing to Oliver now." "How do you feel?" "Free," she said, then looked at David carefully. "The lawyer said you'd inquired about adoption procedures." "I inquired. That's all." "David, I need more time, Rebecca. I can't just jump into being his legal father because his biological one signed papers. I'm not pushing. She paused. "I'm grateful you're even considering it." That evening, Victoria called Rebecca with an ultimatum. "If you're going to continue this charade with David, I'm cutting off financial support." Rebecca put her on speaker. "What charade, Mother?" "Playing house with your ex-husband. It's unseemly." "We're not playing house. We're co-parenting." "He's not Oliver's father." "He's the only father Oliver has ever known," Rebecca shot back. "And if you can't see that, then maybe your money isn't worth it." The line went silent. Then Victoria hung up. "She'll cut you off," David said quietly. "Let her." Rebecca's voice was steady. "I got a job, starting next week. Marketing consultant, work from home mostly. It's not much, but with Connor's child support." "You got a job?" "Don't sound so shocked. I worked before we married, remember?" "I remember." There was something in the air between them. Not romance, not yet, maybe never, but understanding. Growth, the possibility of something rebuilt from honesty instead of lies. August brought a scare. Oliver developed a high fever, bringing back memories of his earlier health crisis. David met them at the emergency room without being called. Rebecca had texted him, and he'd simply appeared. "It's just an ear infection," the doctor assured them hours later. Common at this age. They sat in the relief of it. Oliver sleeping against David's chest, Rebecca slumped in the uncomfortable hospital chair. "I was terrified," she admitted, "that it was the spherocytosis coming back." "Me too. You came without me asking. You needed me. Oliver needed me. We always need you." David looked at her then, really looked at her. "I know." They went back to Rebecca's apartment together, David staying to help with Oliver's first dose of antibiotics. It was 3 a.m. before Oliver finally settled. "You should go," Rebecca said, though her voice suggested otherwise. "I should." But he was still there when the sun came up, asleep on the couch, Oliver's monitor in his hand. "Patricia visited me that afternoon, her lawyer daughter in tow. We've drawn up adoption papers," she said without preamble, "just in case David decides to move forward. He hasn't decided anything." "No, but when he does, it'll be ready. The process is straightforward. Connor's rights are terminated. Rebecca consents, home study, court approval." "You think he'll do it?" Patricia looked at the photos on my wall. David with Oliver at the park, at the beach, covered in spaghetti sauce after a particularly messy dinner. "I think he already has. He just hasn't admitted it yet." September came with milestones. Oliver took his first real steps, wobbling from Rebecca to David and back again, laughing when he fell. His vocabulary expanded beyond Davy to include mama, up, and mysteriously, elephant. Elephant, David corrected for the 100th time. Elephant, Oliver insisted, hugging his stuffed toy. Close enough, Rebecca laughed. They'd developed a routine that looked dangerously like a family. Sunday dinners at my house, playground visits, grocery shopping together because Oliver was easier to manage with 2 people. David had a key to Rebecca's apartment for emergencies. Rebecca knew the code to David's building, just in case. You're playing with fire, I warned David one evening. I'm being practical. You're falling back in love with the idea of a family. No, he corrected. I'm falling in love with the reality of one. Messy, complicated, built on ruins, but real. And Rebecca? What about her? David, he sighed. She's different. The therapy, the work, taking responsibility, she's different. But different enough? I don't know. October brought a surprise. David had been dating sporadically. A teacher named Julia who seemed nice enough. He'd been careful, not introducing her to Oliver, keeping that part of his life separate. But Julia figured it out anyway. You're in love with your ex-wife, she said simply over coffee. That's not... And raising her child that isn't yours, but somehow is. Julia smiled sadly. I can't compete with that, David. I wouldn't want to. I'm sorry. Don't be. What you're doing, choosing love over biology, forgiveness over bitterness, it's beautiful. Complicated and painful, but beautiful. After Julia left, David sat in his car for an hour, then drove to Rebecca's. She answered the door in pajamas, Oliver on her hip. We need to talk, he said. Okay. She let him in, settled Oliver with his toys. What's wrong? I can't keep doing this halfway thing. Rebecca's face fell. You're leaving? David, please. No, I'm not leaving. I'm saying I can't keep pretending I'm Uncle David when I'm his dad. I wake up thinking about him. I plan my days around him. I love him like he's mine because in every way that matters, he is. What are you saying? I want to adopt him, officially, legally. But Rebecca, I need things from you. Anything. Couples therapy. You and me. Not to get back together, but to work through what happened. To build something healthy for Oliver. Yes, and time. This isn't instant. We rebuild slowly, carefully. Oliver comes first, always. I understand. And if you ever lie to me again, I won't. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. David, I swear, I know what I lost. I know what I almost lost. I won't risk Oliver's happiness again. David pulled out the adoption papers Patricia's daughter had drawn up. These are ready when we are. Rebecca looked at them, tears falling freely now. You had these prepared? Patricia did. She knows me better than I know myself sometimes. David, are you sure? This is permanent. If I mess up again, if something happens, then Oliver will still have a father who chose him, who fought for him, who loved him even when the world said he shouldn't. They told Oliver together, though at 15 months he just laughed and demanded up from David. He doesn't understand, Rebecca said. He will. One day I'll tell him the whole story, how love isn't about blood or perfect circumstances. It's about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. That night, I hosted dinner to celebrate the decision. Patricia came, bringing champagne. Even Victoria showed up, subdued and trying to accept what she couldn't change. I suppose, Victoria said stiffly, Oliver could do worse for a father. Thanks for the ringing endorsement, David replied dryly. But later, I saw Victoria watching David with Oliver, saw something shift in her expression, understanding maybe, or just resignation to a love she couldn't buy or control. As the evening wound down, I found David outside, Oliver sleeping in his arms, looking at the stars. Your dad would be proud, I said softly. You think? He always said family was about choosing each other, every day. Biology just gets you in the door. I'm scared, Mom. What if I'm making a mistake? Every parent is scared. But David, you've already been Oliver's father for a year. The papers just make it official. And Rebecca? That's a different question for a different day. David kissed Oliver's head, breathing in that baby smell that wouldn't last much longer. I can live with that. The adoption hearing was set for December 15th, 3 months after David signed the papers. Judge Catherine Brennan, a small woman with silver hair and knowing eyes, reviewed our case in her chambers. David sat straight-backed, nervous in his best suit. Rebecca beside him, Oliver in her lap, playing with a toy gavel the bailiff had given him. "This is an unusual situation," Judge Brennan said, looking over her glasses. "Mr. Collins, you're asking to adopt a child that you know isn't biologically yours after divorcing the mother due to infidelity that resulted in said child." "Yes, Your Honor." "Why?" David looked at Oliver, who was now trying to eat the gavel. "Because biology doesn't determine love. I've been his father since the day he was born. The truth about his DNA doesn't change that he learned to walk holding my hands, that his first word was my name, that when he's scared or hurt, I'm who he reaches for." "Mrs. Collins, excuse me, Miss Harrison, you consent to this?" "Completely, Your Honor. David is Oliver's father, in every way that matters." The judge reviewed the home study, the therapist reports, the carefully documented year of David's involvement. "Mr. McBride has terminated all rights?" "Yes, Your Honor," Rebecca confirmed. "He lives in Singapore now. He's never met Oliver. And you two are co-parents," David said firmly. "We're in therapy together to ensure we can provide Oliver with a stable, loving environment." Judge Brennan studied them both, then looked at me. "You're the paternal grandmother?" "I'm Oliver's grandmother," I corrected gently. "The paternal part stopped mattering the first time I held him." She smiled slightly. "I see it runs in the family." The hearing was supposed to be routine, but Victoria chose that moment to stand. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Rebecca went pale. "Mother, no. I need to say this." Victoria walked forward, dignified despite her clear discomfort. "I tried to prevent this. I thought biology mattered, that money mattered, that social standing mattered. But I've watched David this past year. He stayed when when the biological father fled. He loved Oliver through illness, through sleepless nights, through a betrayal that would have broken most men." She turned to David. "I was wrong. Oliver is lucky to have you." It was the closest to an apology Victoria had ever managed, and David accepted it with a graceful nod. Judge Brennan signed the papers at 2:47 p.m. on a snowy Thursday afternoon. "Congratulations, Mr. Collins. You are officially Oliver's legal father." David's hands shook as he took the decree. Oliver, obvious to the magnitude of the moment, had fallen asleep against his shoulder, drooling slightly on his suit jacket. "Thank you," David whispered, though whether to the judge, to God, or to Oliver himself, I couldn't say. We celebrated at my house, a quiet dinner with just family. Patricia brought a cake that said, "Official Dad," in blue frosting. Oliver destroyed it with his usual enthusiasm, smearing icing in his hair while we laughed. "So what now?" Patricia asked, as we watched David and Rebecca work together to clean chocolate off a squirming toddler. "Now they keep going," I said, "day by day, choice by choice." "You think they'll get back together?" "I think they're building something new. Whether that includes romance," I shrugged. "That's their journey." Spring came again, marking 2 years since that horrible phone call about Oliver's birth. David and Rebecca had found their rhythm, still divorced, but partnered in parenting. They'd moved into the same building, different apartments, but close enough that Oliver could toddle between them when he got bigger. "It's unconventional," Rebecca admitted during one of our coffee mornings while the boys were at the park. "But it works." "Unconventional seems to be our family specialty," I said, watching through the window as David pushed Oliver on the swings, both of them laughing. "Martha, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How did you forgive me? After everything I did, the lies, keeping you from Oliver's birth. How?" I thought about it, stirring my coffee slowly. "I didn't forgive you all at once. It came in pieces. When I saw you struggling to comfort Oliver alone, when you chose his well-being over your mother's money, when you went to therapy and did the work, I met her eyes. When you gave David the choice to be Oliver's legal father without any conditions, I owed him that. You owed him nothing. You could have kept Oliver, moved away, started fresh. You chose to stay and rebuild, for Oliver, at first. But Rebecca, I've watched you these past 2 years. You've become someone different, someone better." She wiped at her eyes. "I'm trying. I know. That's why forgiveness was possible." That evening, we had an unexpected visitor. Connor McBride stood at my door looking older, worn down by whatever life he'd built in Singapore. "I'd like to see him," he said simply. "Oliver, just once. You terminated your rights. I know. I'm not trying to change that. I need to see him, to know he's okay." I called David, who came immediately with Oliver. Rebecca arrived minutes later. We all stood in my living room, tension thick as fog. Connor looked at Oliver, now 2.5, red curls wild, building blocks with intense concentration. "He looks like me," Connor said softly. "He looks like himself," David corrected, moving protectively closer to Oliver. "You're raising him?" "I'm his father." Connor studied David, then nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." Oliver looked up at the stranger, then immediately reached for David. "Daddy, up!" David lifted him, and Oliver wrapped his arms around his neck, eyeing Connor warily. "He's shy with strangers," Rebecca said, not unkindly, but with clear boundaries. "I am a stranger," Connor admitted. "I always will be." He pulled out an envelope. "This is medical history. Everything from my side, conditions, allergies, things you should know. And," he hesitated, "a college fund. It's the least I can do." "We don't need your money," David said. "It's not for you. It's for him. Please." After Connor left, we all sat in silence. Oliver, oblivious to the tension, had returned to his blocks, babbling happily about building a big tower for Daddy. "You okay?" Rebecca asked David. "Yeah. Oddly, yeah. Seeing him, it just confirmed what I already knew, which is that DNA doesn't make a father. Showing up does." 5 years have passed since that day. Oliver is 7 now, bright and curious, with David's mannerisms and Rebecca's quick wit. He knows his story, age-appropriate portions of it, that Daddy David chose to be his father, that love makes a family, not just blood. David and Rebecca found their way back to each other slowly, carefully. They remarried last spring, a small ceremony in my backyard, Oliver as ring bearer, Patricia officiating with an online certificate she'd gotten just for the occasion. "Second chances," Rebecca had said in her vows, "aren't about erasing the past. They're about choosing a different future." Victoria, remarkably, has become a devoted grandmother, though she still insists Oliver needs proper etiquette lessons. Connor sends a card each Christmas, nothing more. The college fund grows untouched. David and Rebecca are determined to provide for Oliver themselves. This morning, Oliver asked me to tell him again about when he was born. "You want the whole story?" I asked, settling him on my lap. "The whole story, Grandma." So I told him about love that transcends biology, about his father who chose him again and again, about his mother who learned from her mistakes, about families built from broken pieces that somehow become whole. "Was everyone always happy?" he asked. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes we were very sad, but we chose to love anyway." "That's brave," he said matter-of-factly, then ran off to play. Yes, I thought, watching him go. It was. Love isn't about being invited to the beginning of someone's story. It's about choosing to stay when the plot takes unexpected turns, about writing new chapters when the original draft falls apart, about understanding that the families we choose are often stronger than the ones we're born into. That's the legacy I'll leave my grandson, the knowledge that love is a choice we make every day, and the bravest thing you can do is keep choosing it, even when, especially when, it would be easier to walk away. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about family, love, and new beginnings, then I invite you to stay here. On this channel, each story carries a lesson, a piece of life, and perhaps even a reflection of ourselves. So, if you haven't already, subscribe now. Leave your like so that more people can find this message, and tell me in the comments how this story made you feel. Oh, and if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it. Sometimes a story comes at just the right moment. Thank you for being here. And remember, tomorrow a new story awaits you. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about family, love, and new beginnings, then I invite you to stay here. On this channel, each story carries a lesson, a piece of life, and perhaps even a reflection of ourselves. So, if you haven't already, subscribe now. Leave your like so that more people can find this message, and tell me in the comments how this story made you feel. Oh, and if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it. Sometimes a story comes at just the right moment. Thank you for being here, and remember, tomorrow a new story awaits you.
何このなんか無言の感じ。みんなめっちゃ可愛いやん。 やっぱアークナイツは本当にみんななんか表情と動きが豊かでいいわ。
まあいいじゃん。車ちゃんも無事だったし、みんなの役にも立てたんだし、とにかく修理が終わったらもうこんな使い方しちゃダメだからね、絶対。と
は
にかく
い。
実験室で修理はできないんだよね。研究所の裏口にある点検修理プラットフォームに連れて行かなきゃ。ああ、そうだ。来たついでにこの研究室にいるランドブレーカーちょいっとやっちゃってほしいな。
はい。
実は入ってきた時にちょうど交換パーツの調整してて、それがもうすぐ終わるとこだから。仕事になるとなんかきっちりしてるね。この部屋とは違ってさ、なんも違わないって。この部屋は隅から隅まで私好みにしてあるんだから、
うー
研究の
ん。も
時のインス
う
ピレ
根っ
ーショ
からの
ンと一
研
緒。
究者なんやな、ちゃんと。
どっちも直感が大事ってこと。ここでちょっと休憩してていいよ。あ、勝手にいろいろ触んないでよね。じゃあ後で一緒に下行くからね。
はい。手伝えることあるかな。
おー、休んでていいって言ってるのに、どうしてもって言うなら、あっちのラックにいっぱいレコード置いてあるから適当に持ってきてくれる？
おー、音楽かける感じね。レコ
もし
ードなんだ、
そ
この
れが
世界はま
私
だ。
の一番のお気に入りだったら、作業効率めっちゃ上がるかもだしね。
えそんな、俺が選ぶ感じなのこれ。もしかしてレコード。
じゃあ楽しみにしてるね。
イボンヌの好きなの。でもこの部屋は好きなものしかないって言ってたから全部好きじゃないの。そういうわけでもない。
試作モデルの設計図じゃん。懐かしい。
なんかヒント書いてそうだけど書いてないな。
その
イボンヌのためにレコードを選ぼう。レトロなレコードを選択。未開封のレコード。好きって言ってるからもうレトロなレコードのどれかでしょう。
これアンドレが置いてったやつだ。管
ああ、
理人の趣味
終わっ
はアンドレイと一緒ってことか。
なんで未
アン
開
ドレイ、
封のものを大好きって
昔の
言
武勇
え
伝語り始めると3回に1回
る
は
の？ね
管理人が出てく
え、どうい
るんだよ
うこ
ね。
と？しかもアンドレイのセンスと一緒ってなんかさ、
ああだこうだ話し合ったもんだって。あの話別に持
なん
ってなかっ
かもう、
たんだ。
なえる
まあ
おじさん
世
ってこ
代的にはぴったりの曲でも仕事。
と？別の曲にしようっと。やめよう、止めよう。じゃあ止めよう。こっちにしよう。
あ、これ先週届いてまだ聞いてなかったやつ。いい曲だけど